Hey everybody, welcome to Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels Radio. My name is Sawyer.
And I'm Giacomo.
All right, so today we're talking about common mistakes on the vegan diet.
Whoa,
I'm
whoa, whoa,
excited.
whoa. You didn't even warm me up at all. That's it. You just go right
Oh,
in
I'm
for the topic,
sorry. I
Sawyer.
got I got
I
too
don't get
excited.
it. Aw.
I'm known to do this. But yeah, okay, well, we'll warm it up. I think there's a lot of people that could use this message,
Mhm.
and that's because when people invariably start going more plant-based, they're going to make certain mistakes, and I think we all did make certain mistakes. We're not gonna make all of those mistakes. I think typically they like when I was looking at the list I made, I think I was leaning towards like, okay, there's some mistakes that like more junk food vegans will make, and then there's some mistakes like more like whole food vegans will make. So I think generally there's two camps. Did you agree with that, or do you think that's a little too simplistic?
Junk food, whole food, and then people who don't know what they're doing, but they're bought into going vegan.
Okay, so three camps. Got it.
We could keep going, but for the purpose of simplicity, yeah, why don't we stick with that? I like it.
Okay.
So, but before we get ready, well, so where did you fall when you went vegan? Let's give the audience
Ooh,
a little bit
that's
about
a good
us too.
that's a good one. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think well, when I went vegan, it was like 2016, I think. So I didn't really know, and I was the first vegan I knew, so I didn't really know of any like I don't even think Beyond Burgers were out then. Like that was so it was kind of like harder to be a junk food vegan, I think, in that phase. And I didn't know that there was like a lot of or I didn't even know like what junk food options there were. So I think I was more whole food. And so but I was also like very aware of how many calories I was eating, and so I had different problems than I think a lot of people will, but there's some things that show up on the list that I made that I experienced. But I think I don't know. I can't tell how typical my experience is because so many people are so different. But I'd say I was more whole food side than anything. What about you?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. When I went vegan, I was in an orthorexic like place and I was
Mhm.
young and it was 20 years ago and I was 22 and there were no options.
Yeah.
So it was like 22, 2002, no
Mhm.
options. I was just looking for the way to be healthier. And I was still like, okay, well, I want to make sure that I can perform. This
Hmm.
can't get in the way of me becoming a better athlete. So I was a mess
Okay.
back then with all of that, and I didn't have many options. So I
Yeah.
guess you could say I fell in the whole food camp, if I'm being
Okay.
as honest as
Yeah.
possible there. Yeah, for sure. Zero junk food. Zero. Absolutely
Really?
not.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think yeah, I definitely looking back, I'm like, where was I trying? I was trying to get my protein from like all lentils or like all like just things that are very tough to eat enough of to get enough protein. But I was like, I'm gonna do it. I have to do it because I didn't know of any alternative. So yeah, as I got into it more, I was like, wow, this is so much easier now. But at the beginning, it was a little bit weird to figure out. So yeah, hopefully we can help clear those things up for people today and help them avoid some of the pitfalls we fell into.
Well, sure. And to the pitfalls that our clients have fell into over the years, and then they come to us, and even though they've done the work on their own, you can recognize the patterns and the different things that they're still working through, and meeting them where they're at can be a little bit tricky sometimes. But hopefully, putting this
Yeah.
information out there can help people feel more supported, not shamed, and have the opportunity to think about this stuff and process this stuff on their own, or maybe think about what they've worked through and our perspective on it over here. So,
Yeah,
uh,
I think there's going to be
mhm,
something for everybody in this because I think
mhm.
we cover a whole lot. Like there's 10 of them, right? So there's a whole lot of mistakes and they can kind of span different camps or different mindsets for different people. So I think it'll be good. You want to start off with number one? I didn't put them in any particular order, by the way. I don't know if you want to do like, like whole food first or something like that. Okay. Well, number one, if you're ready to go over it, number one is not eating enough calories. Was that something that you experienced?
Well, I can say that with my clients, I can't think of exact experiences, but I know that that can be a problem when when they are not eating enough and they don't understand that they're not eating enough. And you have to walk them through the process where it's like, okay, well, you've changed your diet, you're confused, you want to make sure you're gaining muscle or you're stressed out about your choices and what to eat and how to eat. And then the answer is simple. It's because they're not eating enough. And then you have to explain what's on your plate. How much food is on your plate doesn't necessarily translate to how many calories you're eating. That's the biggest
Yeah,
mistake right there.
absolutely. I think this could apply to the people in the camp of like the whole food camp for sure. but also the don't know what they're doing camp, right? Because they might not be counting calories or trying to be super healthy necessarily, but where they're at, options that are limited, and they don't know how many calories they're taking in because they're not really sure about this stuff, and so they just end up eating far too few calories, like and having the the hunger and stuff like that. Because that's the people who say like, oh, I just went vegan for a couple weeks and I was like so hungry and I think my body just like needs meat or something like that. They'll just say something like blanket statement like they've figured it out and they tried it but they can't do it. It's just not healthy for them. And yeah, to me, that's the red flag in my mind goes off like, okay, you don't know how many calories you're eating because if you were eating enough like say you were eating 4,000 calories a day on accident, I promise you would not be hungry hormonally or otherwise, but you weren't doing that. You were probably just not tracking anything. You were probably just trying to eat clean whole foods or whatever, and you ended up eating, 1,500 calories a day and you were starving. So like that's kind of what I think, usually happens when people aren't paying attention to those things or they're trying to be super, super clean eating and they end up just way undershooting their calorie needs. So I don't know. Do you want to talk about like kind of solutions to each of these things, or do you just want to just describe the problem and then go back and talk about them, or what do you feel like is the best
I
format
like
here?
the idea of talking about solutions and helping people understand what's on their plate and thinking
Hmm.
about how you can become more aware, like avoiding that pitfall.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have anything like I have some ideas, but
Go
do you
for
want to
it.
go over it first? Oh, okay. So I'm thinking immediately it's very hard to know somebody's caloric needs based on just looking at them because you've got a physical activity level, you've got genetics, you've got all kinds of things. So what I typically tell people is, look, if you're not sure where to start in terms of calories when you go vegan, it's gonna be similar to where you were before you went vegan because it's going you have the same caloric needs, right? You didn't gain 50 pounds of muscle overnight or anything like that. So what you can do is you can download a calorie tracking app like chronometer, I never know how to say it. Down one of those apps
Hmm.
and put in a typical day of eating before you went vegan, right? Or before you started going plant-based. Typical day of eating, that's probably going to be around your maintenance about. And then you can take that number and say, okay, well, I'm going to do this number, but vegan, and I'm going to plug it in and do all the things. And you might find, oh, I have to eat a bit more based on the food choices that I'm making. Or maybe you say, well, I'm going to eat something a little more calorie dense because I don't want to eat that much, or whatever it is. Well, you'll have an idea of like where your maintenance calories are, and you'll have an idea of where to go because if you want to gain weight or if you want to lose weight, you just add or subtract a few hundred calories from that amount and you'll start heading in that direction. So it's also going to help you get into better shape or move in the direction you want to move. So assuming you want to move some direction with your
Yeah.
weight. So I think getting an idea of how many calories you've been eating historically can help you really not only go in a better direction if you're trying to change stuff, but also just have a good idea of, okay, this is my body's needs. I should probably be eating around here even when I go vegan because it doesn't change. Calories are calories at that level anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And the more you become aware of how much you're eating, the more you can realize how you have to change what's on your plate to meet your needs. Or if food is making you full because it's voluminous, like if you're eating lots of vegetables, I want to eat healthier. I want more nutrients. I'm loving being on a plant-based diet because I get to eat fresh food and fresh produce and it tastes really good and I love how it feels. But
Yeah.
you're filling up with food that is filled with water and
Mm,
fiber and takes up a lot of space in your stomach. And then before you know it, you're like, well, but you're actually hungry.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause the way I describe this is to people is like there's two main physiological functions of your body to like cue hunger, and one is that you have mechanical sensors kind of in your stress sensors in your stomach to tell if
Mm.
it's full or not, right? So you got that thing telling you if you're hungry. It's like, oh, my stomach feels empty. I should probably fill it with something, right? But then there's also the hormonal hunger. There's leptin and ghrelin, which control, okay, hormonally, am I in a good place for hunger? So, those things are being controlled by things like blood sugar and things by like fat loss. Like those will ramp up those hunger hormones and decrease the satisfaction hormone. And then you end up being really hungry even though your stomach is full. And people are like, "Oh, that's not right. That can't be healthy, right? Like I've never been full and also hungry." That's what it's like when you're hormonally hungry, when you've lost some body fat and your body's starting to notice and you're like,
Mm.
wait, how do I stop this? So it's not a bad thing if you're trying to lose weight and you're probably going to notice a little bit of hunger like we do when we're coaching people. There's a little bit of hunger involved with losing weight. But if you're not in control of that, if you don't really know how the heck do I get not hungry? It's because you might know how to get full in one sense, but not the other, right? You might know how to fill up your stomach with food, but you don't know how to be in control of how many calories your body actually needs. And you're just kind of falling where the chips are just falling where they may, and you're eating this amount of calories on average, and it's not enough, or it's too much, or it's right, just right. You're kind of just not in control of that number, basically.
It's not a fun conversation to have with yourself. It's not a fun conversation to process when you're having it with other people and your mind starts to wander with all kinds of unreasonable things because you're looking for an answer. Why are you feeling like this? Who's blaming a plant-based diet? What are you lacking? Did you make a mistake doing this? Are you whatever, just not enjoying the way that you're eating? And people come up with all these reasons because they're unaware of what's going on when it could be something as simple as you're just not.
Yeah. And that's fertile ground for grifters to come in and be like,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
this is why vegan diets aren't healthy and everybody's crazy who thinks they are. So anyway, whatever. But I think we've talked that one enough up. What
Oh
do you
yeah.
think? Do you cover that one? Okay.
We could keep each one of these. I feel like they're going to tie into the other, so we don't
Sure,
have to.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
I mean this
sure.
next one is pretty similar. It's
Mm,
it's not eating enough protein. Similar concept. You're not in control, you're not aware of how much protein you're eating. In a standard American diet, you're probably going to be getting enough protein in I mean for health purposes, not for like optimal bodybuilding purposes, but for health purposes without really having to think about it at all. So people who are transitioning to a vegan diet might just think, oh, it's probably going to be the same thing. It could be depending on what you gravitate towards eating. But again, you're just letting the chips fall where they may. You don't really actually know. And so if you're never tracking these things, or at least to get a baseline, you don't necessarily need to track forever. But if you don't have like a baseline of like, oh, this is about how much protein I'm getting and this is good, you might end up like losing muscle and being like, what the heck just happened? It's the vegan diet, oh my gosh, So it's another one of those things that like, I think protein and calories should be at the forefront of people's minds a lot of the time, as like from like a 30,000 foot point of view, but especially when you're transitioning to some new kind of way of eating that you're not really sure if those are going to be adequate. Like those are really the big rocks that we need to move when we're changing things. I don't know. Would you agree with that? Would you add anything else to that? I'm curious.
that's such an easy one. I like seeing those who overcorrect and wind up getting in too much protein. I like to brag about that, being like, "See, you could do it." But
Oh yeah.
yes, that is a common mistake when
Yeah.
someone is making any sort of dietary change. They wind up being too fearful of making the wrong decisions, so they just don't eat enough of the right things, or they go in the opposite direction. They just eat too much of what they think is right and then they overdo it. But most people are stuck somewhere in between and they're just trying to make a dietary shift, right? And when you are, let's say, getting in, I don't know, 1,800 calories and you need to get in 135 grams of protein, but you're getting in 80,
Hmm.
that's a problem. When you're taking in 2,800 calories or 2,600 calories, whatever, and you need to get in 165 grams of protein and you're getting in 130, that's a problem. And that little amount, you hate to throw it out there when someone comes to vegan proteins and they're like, this is my dilemma. How come I'm not building muscle like I used to before I was vegan? And you're like, well, you need about 25 to 50 grams more protein. And it's probably closer to the lower number. And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah, really. And it's hard to say that directly to somebody because it's one of those things where the answer is usually the simplest thing right in front of you. But as human beings, we complicate everything and
Hmm.
there's complexity in it. And you're trying to feel your way through something and it takes time to learn something. And if you don't have this information, like we're giving it to you right now, right in front of you, and you're getting mixed information from the place, so you just don't know what you're doing, you can make that unfortunate misstep for a long period of time. And it can cost you several pounds of lean body mass and several years of frustration where you're unwilling to even think back to what you could have done differently. And before you know it, you're not, a plant-based diet wasn't for you or whatever. It's
Yeah.
frustrating.
I can see that. I think if people don't get anything else out of this podcast, it's like, okay, make sure you know that you're getting enough protein and calories no matter what your dietary preferences and like way you're
Mhm.
doing things are. Those are some of the things that I think need to be, at least for fitness purposes. You might be able to skate by with health without health complications by not like knowing these things if you're eating a relatively balanced diet. But I think if you're frustrated by not getting fitness results, you need to know where those things are averaging around, the protein and the calories. I think those are some of the biggest things that if you overlook them and you're having problems there, but you just don't realize it, you're just going to struggle like indefinitely. There's no amount of like tips and tricks videos you can watch until you're, filling the plugging those holes. Those are giant holes in your chip, you know what I mean, that you need to give attention to.
Well, what are the
So,
reasons why people don't get in enough protein? The ones that come to mind for me are
mm,
that they're trying to find foods that they enjoy and they're
mm,
reframing the way they think about what's on their plate. So where they would normally have chicken breast or steak or salmon or whatever, now they're like, well, wait a minute, like tofu and seitan and this is not. So they have that disconnect there and they start to whatever. And then the other thing is that they don't understand that they can find a little bit of protein in everything in it's less about the overt protein that's just pure protein is on your plate like you're going to get balance of it, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
yeah, I think, I mean, for like in my case, it was just not being aware. Like I had no
Mhm.
idea what seitan was. I had no idea what TVP was. I didn't, I knew what tofu was, but I didn't know how to make it, and I didn't think I would like it. So I didn't even, that wasn't even my first thought. I was just like, oh, lentils have protein. Like I literally would just go down the grocery aisle and like look for things that were vegan that had protein in them. Like that's how little guidance I had. But I think there's so much information now that people probably have different issues, right? They probably are just not finding ways that they enjoy to eat protein or something like that. But I'm not really sure, I think a lot of people it's just different. It depends on what circles you've been running in, if you know other vegans or not, and I think you got to take it on a case by case basis. But I think a big thing is if you're someone who likes to have those distinct like food group macronutrient food groups, the chicken and the rice and the broccoli kind of people, then okay, then do one-to-one change of like seitan and rice and broccoli. It's like it's so easy. But if you're someone who really wants to do like the more whole foods approach and you really want to have all kinds of fiber now, like all the time, then you could, yeah, I think you're right. It's going to look more like they're going to look more like Buddha bowl type things where you got the beans and the rice and the salsa and you know what I mean? And that's there's a billion ways to do it. So I think people just need to get familiarized with how they're going to enjoy it most and what's going to hit that number for them, that protein and calorie number that we are talking about before. So
I feel like people try to get healthier, and as they're trying to get healthier, that the specific type of person, when they stumble upon veganism and then their goal is to get healthier, for some reason, some of them fear protein or they obsess about foods that are nutrient dense, and they're
yeah,
forgetting the fact that they have to focus on protein as well,
yeah.
and then they just wind up unintentionally not getting enough protein or thinking that they can't.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of fear mongering around like soy and, stuff like that, which needs to go away. And I think like
Mhm.
or like, the vegan meats like get a lot of scare tactics. People talk about them in like the influencer space a lot. So, I mean, what can you do though? I think at the end of the day, people will develop more of an understanding of this stuff over time and hopefully be less afraid of it as they realize like, oh, people are eating this and it's really not that crazy to have soy every day or things like that. I think it'll become more normalized and less scary. But at first, you just need to be okay with the idea of I need to try new foods. I need to be open to new ideas because if I just stick rigidly to I'm only getting my protein from beans or I'm only going to be getting, eating salads from now on or something like that, rigidity of that kind is just ready to break. Like at the first sign of inconvenience, at the first health problem, because it's going to happen if you're too rigid in your approach. It's just going to fall apart at some point.
I think we
So
got enough on the protein one. Why don't we
I
move
think,
on to
yeah,
the next one on your list with trying not to eat any processed foods or even minimally processed ones.
yeah,
Where was your head on that one?
yeah, sure. I mean, we already kind of talked about that. Like,
I
this
know.
kind of just said it, which is like, yeah, eating only unprocessed foods is generally pretty healthy, but there are issues with doing that, especially if you take it to the extreme of I'm not going to have any minimally processed foods like soy milk or tofu, which are really helpful for like hitting calcium numbers or hitting, you know what I mean? Like hitting enough protein. So there's going to be problems if and it's not to say that you couldn't do it. It's just going to be especially in this modern world where not everybody's just emphasizing diet to the max. It's going to become so inconvenient, in my opinion, that you won't be able to keep it up, especially with like social events and traveling and stuff like that. So I think
But
the
what's the
rigidity,
purpose? What's the purpose behind minimally processed foods and looking to not get them in?
yeah, I know. I think it's a dogmatic thing where people
Hmm.
are worried about any kind of processing at all. Like they see it as a black and white thing. They're like, oh,
Hmm.
processed bad, unprocessed good. And so
Hmm.
everything they can get is going to be unprocessed. It's going to be all organic. It's going to be all like that. And if they don't do that, then they have demonized it. right? But it's more of a gradient than that. It's a spectrum. And if you think that eating, Pop-Tart is the same as eating as drinking some unsweetened soy milk or something like that, then you have been effectively marketed to, my friend, because they're very different profile nutritionally. And also, so what I
Mhm.
tell people like that is, look, there are lots of scary mechanistic data that we could go into, like, oh, we gave rats 5,000, grams, milligrams of red dye 40 or whatever, and they got this issue. Sure, yeah, that happens. But you could also drink enough water and die too, right? So something being natural and not made in a lab doesn't necessarily make it healthy or unhealthy. What we need to do is rely on data that gives us health outcomes. And so when somebody says, "Oh, I wouldn't eat that, that's poison," you can come back and say, "Well, what really matters, if you're looking at the data, is one, overall dietary pattern, and two, when you put something into the context of an overall ecosystem, but it's like a tiny, tiny little fraction of it, like for instance, like sweeteners or something like that, non-calorie sweeteners, they might have some deleterious effects, but overall, if you're eliminating the need or the use of like full sugar things and things that we know have worse health outcomes in higher quantities, then overall it's a net benefit. And so I think people need to stop thinking in black and white, and they need to think of overall dietary pattern and what's going to make shift it in the right direction, what's going to shift it in the wrong direction. Because a lot of times, and I have a lot of clients that come to me and they have these very specific protocols they try to stick to because they're like, this is the perfect diet, but then practically it doesn't work. They try to apply it and then it breaks every couple of weeks because they haven't actually given themselves enough flexibility, enough room to move in their little food prison of a cage.
Mhm.
They can't even turn around. So the second they get tested with it, it just breaks apart and they don't stick to it anymore. So you have to build into the system an ability to move, and you have a little bit of things that you enjoy a little bit more, a little bit more indulgent, a little more flexible. Otherwise, you're not going to stick to it. And also, it just doesn't make sense to be that rigid because in the context of health outcome data, you don't have to be perfect to get really good health results. Sorry, I'm a little bit on my soapbox here, but I'm like
Oh
definitely.
no, it's very interesting to hear how you think about this stuff. I'm following completely, and I have very similar opinions. And while you're talking about the data and going over how it all makes sense, I think about how it affects people and their psyche and how they wrap their head around it and what they're, instead of just trying to understand like what's going to lead to you getting healthier long term, what's going to lead to you enjoying food more long term. Some people
Yeah.
are so outcome driven that they get lost in the process and they actually, I don't want to say they do more harm than good. They slow down their potential to actually get the outcome they're looking for because they're just so focused on how healthy can I be? How long can I live? How can I do this just right? This is why
Yeah.
I'm doing this in the first place.
Yeah.
And they don't understand that if their process causes them to resent foods that they're going to have anyway and feel ashamed to eat them, and that's, and again, I don't want to be judgy and say it's a form of restriction. Obviously it is. However, it's, again, you get lost in the process. You blame yourself for not being able to get the outcome you're looking for. You justify it, continuing to try it over and over and over again, and you're stuck in this endless loop. Pain in the
Yeah,
butt.
you're right to think about the psychology of it all because it's very hard to communicate to people. What I find to be have some success with is to
Mm.
relate it to an area that those people understand really well because there's almost something, that somebody understands really, really well. They've spent a lot of years like really wrapping their heads around it. And with nutrition, it's very hard for people to understand. There's a lot of degrees of nuance there. But if you can get them to relate to another area of nuance where they're like, "Oh yeah, it's not that simple. Like don't like eschew this school of thought or that school of thought because there's truth in each of them," and implant that into nutrition and could just kind of say, "Hey, it's hard to describe right now, but just know that yes, there's an ideal and like there's some things to strive for, but then there's also some concessions we should make because if we don't, then it all unravels when you're trying to be too ideal, too perfectionist. So don't in short, just don't let perfection be the enemy of progress, basically.
Exactly. If I try to, what usually gets people to get it is I ask them if they're going to be eating like this for the next, for forever. Or in
Yeah,
5 years, do you see yourself? The answer, it's rhetorical. And it
yeah.
gets them further along instead of it becoming a debate or an argument or them not wanting to take accountability for what they're going through because they feel whatever about it.
Yeah,
They're
I think
afraid
this
to
is
approach it.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue into another one, which we're
Go
going to
for it.
skip one for now. But the next one, which is becoming a disciple of one person who is, yeah, they're just like this is the person that
Yeah.
understands
Yeah.
nutrition the best, and their recommendations are the best always. It's become a religion for them. It's become dogma.
Mhm.
And when that happens, it doesn't even necessarily mean that the person is wrong about everything. There are certain people that I believe more than others in that, they're more like fact-based than others. But I think even if they are based in reality, like some of these plant-based people that make a lot of sense and a lot of things they say, they can sometimes fall short in the psychology aspect that we're just talking about. They're saying, hey, just do this, just do that. And a lot of it isn't realistic for some people. And so people fall short and then they keep buying the products and trying to get to a certain like standard that's really just not for them and end up doing maybe more harm than good in some cases. So I think, yeah, I think the disciple, type like people who are like, wow, this person is the best nutrition person. I'm going to come to them for all my nutrition questions. I think it becomes a little excessive and it can really start to turn into like putting somebody on a pedestal and I'm just this lowly, I don't know anything and they know everything and I have to just strive to be like them kind of thing. But that doesn't take
Hardest
into account
part
the real life,
doesn't take into account real life. No. And the hardest part is their information is sound. What they're saying is rooted
Yeah.
in science. Their formulas are possible, whatever it is that they're saying, hey, live this kind of lifestyle. In a lot of ways, they're arguably quite healthy if you can live like that comfortably. But there are a lot
Yeah.
of holes in it, and there isn't a one size fits all kind of thing. And if you're not
Yeah.
able to take more, not just with a grain of salt, but if you're not able to take all the good information, distill it down and create
Yeah.
a way to eat that works for you, and you're trying, like you said, to hold. And these are iconic people. These are doctors who have massive audiences, followings,
Yeah.
with all kinds of support. And
Yeah.
there is something
I
about the communal aspect too, about belonging to something. People, we're social creatures. Even
That's
those
very
of
true.
us who are hermits and introverted and don't really need to bounce off ideas with others, like, we're social creatures by nature. So if you hook onto an idea and you're digesting it and processing on your own, it can be hard to step away from that, even if like somewhere deep down inside, like I should probably be thinking through this a little more.
Absolutely. I think that's why all the names, like the different names of the diets, like people like to clown them because it's like a tribe or whatever. I might piss some people off with this, but like a good example of what we're talking about is Dr. Greger. He has a lot of good information. He has a huge following, but a lot of his stuff is just a little unreachable for people. And also, I think he focuses a little too much on some mechanistic data and kind of scares people and hypes people up, other people up too much about certain things. Because when I was, my dog saw another dog, and that is just not okay in his book. So when I was just becoming vegan and learning about nutrition, and I discovered him, I realized I had been listening to some of his videos, and I was liking what I was hearing, learning a lot. But then I also got, as I get more knowledgeable in nutrition, met some people who were, plant leaning, but not exclusively plant based. And I was like, how is that possible? Because everything Dr. Greger says makes it so clear that plant based eating is just the best. It's like there's no comparable dietary pattern. It couldn't even, you know what I mean? That's what it felt like to me. And the answer that I kept getting back was like, well, first of all, the dietary pattern overall matters a lot, and just being plant-based doesn't, secure your place in heaven, I guess you could say. And also, there's a lot of nuance being left out here because if you zoom in on mechanistic data, like Dr. Greger will talk about dripping the blood of, or dripping milk into the blood of people or whatever, like just very mechanistic, tiny little,
Mm.
non results driven data, like in humans, and like doing a protocol for a while, double blind placebo. When you do a lot of stuff like that and you talk about it that way, it makes it seem, oh my gosh, so clear that people should go vegan and should be eating this way, and it almost becomes like shameful or like bewildering that anybody would choose anything different for health reasons or for fitness reasons. And I think that's where you kind of incentivize people, but you've also you've given them an amount of knowledge that is enough for them just to be pissed off about stuff, but not to really understand like health outcome data and how science works and how dietary patterns overall matter more than like mechanistic data. So I think he gets a good he's good at getting people riled up and like, moving in a direction that's good. But I also think that he can tend to, and it's hard, granted, to educate people this much. It's one of those things where I think people are more excited than they are educated about it. I don't know. Do you agree with that?
It's
Um,
interesting how you describe the limitations there, the way that as far as the way he mechanistically looks at stuff, like just enough to upset, but then it can become challenging and complicated for that person to
Yeah,
figure it
and
out.
not in every case. I think he has a lot of good health outcome data too, like, Adventist study type stuff. But
Hmm.
I think there's some cases where he gets a little overzealous in presenting the data and it's a little too mechanistic, and so it kind of drives people to be like more dogmatic than they need to be about like this is really bad food.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like they're just like for instance, since I've become more educated and followed more nutrition experts and things, it's become clear to me that for nutrition purposes, low fat dairy is really pretty benign in a lot of cases, unfortunately, and like same with fish. From an ethical standpoint, it's abysmal, but from a nutrition standpoint, it's not that deleterious to include those things in certain quantities. And so, but you would never know that from watching Dr. Geyer's content because he never really gives credit where credit's due. And I think that not only does that push people in a dogmatic direction, but it also makes vegans look unwilling to accept reality where we need to. Because I'm going into a whole other tangent. I
I
shouldn't do
get
it,
it. This is a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but it's okay. I'm into
but
it. I'm here. I'm
I'll
following.
just I'll summarize it with this. I'll just say, look, we as vegans need to accept science and the
Yeah.
data that comes
Yeah.
out, regardless of how it makes us feel ethically, because
Right.
like I'm an ethical vegan, like I'm not hiding that. We all have bias, but I do think we need to be honest about when our bias is not fitting the nutrition data, is not fitting the ethical data or whatever. You know what I mean? So we have to be honest because otherwise we're just crazy to everybody else because we can't accept reality. So that's kind of where
Right.
I'll
And but then you can go back to easy lifestyle examples. Well, sure, but if you take is someone really going to have those foods that are okay in small quantities? Probably not. And over the course of a lifetime, that stuff builds up.
Yeah, true.
So you can think about it that way too.
Yeah, it's a dietary pattern thing, and I guess we will never have the like most data, and everybody has to weigh the risk. It's like alcohol.
Hmm.
Like nobody thinks it's healthy. Oh, hopefully nobody thinks it's healthy. There's a lot of flat earther type people out there, but
Mm.
alcohol is not healthy, and everybody has to weigh the risk of like how much do I want to include this? What's the cost benefit? And like how much risk am I really incurring by drinking it? I don't think we're doing any favors to anybody, for example, by saying alcohol will absolutely kill you. And I don't think we're doing any other favors to anybody by saying, it's really not that big of a deal. Neither of those help. You know what I mean? There's no nuance in that. And so I think as vegans, we need to also embrace the nuance and say, look, this probably is not as good as this, but this is better than this. And if you need something like this in your life, then I would go with that. You know what I mean? So there's a little bit of nuance that needs to be added to this conversation. I don't think some of these kind of celebrity doctors do a lot of that. I think they just focus on the ideal and people get a little bit too dogmatic about it, is all I'm saying.
And they
Uh,
speak to certain audiences as opposed to broader audiences, which I can respect. If you want to
yeah,
help people reverse disease, fight disease, speak to a certain
that's true.
demographic age-wise. But when you take it as gospel across the board for all kinds of people, that's when it becomes problematic too, in terms of the dogmatic kind of
Yeah.
stuff where people look at the
Yeah,
info.
imagine. I
Yeah.
mean, this has happened in the fitness community too. We try to talk to people about veganism, and they're like, "Oh, you mean like that guy who refuses to eat any like processed foods or whatever?" And you're like, "How would you do that on a 4,000 calorie a day diet as a bodybuilder or whatever?" We lose people if we don't have any give, if we're just focusing on like one thing, which is like human health, whatever. But anyway, we don't need to go further into that. I'm just thinking that's my station or the contribution I want to make to the conversation at this point.
Where do you want to jump around over here to?
So we did skip one, which is not supplementing with B12. That's one of those things where people, I think, get a little bit too bogged down in the fact that they have to supplement anything, maybe in some cases. But it's just like one of those things where it's like, well, the animals that people are eating are supplementing with B12, and it's because they need to, and we need to. So it's really just, do you supplement it or do you eat someone that's been supplemented? You know what I
Well,
mean?
if you were getting B12 from your food that was enriched with it before you were vegan, why wouldn't you continue to enrich your food and or supplement with B12 after the fact? You're not
Exactly.
getting your B12 from drinking raw
Yeah.
milk. You're not getting your B12 from eating raw or cooked meat that was once raw that is not like you're getting your B12 foods that are enriched. That's how you're
Yeah.
not B12 deficient. So
Exactly.
if you change over and you're eating more fruits and vegetables and probably less processed foods, and the processed foods you're eating are not don't have B12 in it, and everyone is at risk of B12, but B12 and vegans become a target for B12 deficiency. And so
Absolutely.
they take this approach like, oh no, it's fine. They try to, I have something to prove. I can be vegan and I can be healthy. I don't need a supplement. So
Yeah.
you're sitting here trying to prove something and you're going to wind up hurting yourself in the process. And
Yeah.
everyone is fool. It looks foolish, unfortunately. And
Mm.
it's a crying shame because again, across the board, everyone needs to supplement with B12. If I wasn't a fitness coach and for vegans, if I was, I would still be like, can you please supplement with B12? Pretty please. Like,
Yeah.
please don't tell me you don't supplement. Don't tell me you're a purist and you don't supplement. And even if you are, that's fine, but please get a B12 because if your stores get that deficient and you have brain damage, now there's really no way, there's really no coming back from that. Like, just deal with
Absolutely.
it.
100% agree with everything you just said. And I feel like it's just one of those things where people need to stop getting hung up on, oh, this is natural or this isn't natural, or people are going to, not eating a complete diet or whatever. It's just like, we need to stop being so anti-intellectual, so anti-science, and just follow what the data has shown over and over and over again, and supplement with B12. There's really no shame in following what the science says and then doing everything else that you already believe in. It's like it's
You
not
could
a.
think about where food's coming from,
Mhm.
and because you're getting your nutrients from plants and carbohydrates, you just are, no matter how you eat. And if you
Yeah.
think about how we're getting superfoods these days to get our nutrients in, correct?
Mhm.
Why are we getting superfoods in to get our nutrients? Because we're not producing crops, we're not producing food for ourselves. Even when we plant food for ourselves, it's hard to get mineral rich soil, vitamins getting into those plants and those fruits that are
Yeah.
going to feed you properly. And that, this has happened over hundreds of thousands of many thousands of years. And it's just a consequence of us populating the earth and overpopulating the earth and what we haven't done to take care of it. So it's like it just makes no sense. Like you got to get that stuff in, and superfoods, I would argue, are not enough either.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've looked barely into the whole like soil depletion thing.
Hmm.
And there's some people pushing back on that idea. So it's interesting
Interesting.
to me. I do, in the case of B12, to be laser focused on that. In
Hmm.
the case of B12, B12 is found in the soil. So our food is like really, really washed. And so if you're not supplementing B12 and you're not eating an animal that's been supplemented with B12, you're not getting B12 and you need it. So just don't, like, just to be
Don't take
as
any risk.
blunt and clear as possible, please supplement with B12, even if you're eating enriched foods with some B12, you still need to supplement B12.
Yeah,
That, yeah.
100%.
Okay. Cool. Glad we're being clear about that because I know somebody's going to try to say, well, I had soy milk the other day and it had some B12, something, and it's not enough.
We can
So,
debate this forever, but while we're debating it, please take care of your health supplement.
yes. Yes, go follow on the side of caution and then do your research after that. Okay, so we talked about the becoming a disciple. Okay, here's one we can actually group together. Avoiding gluten without celiac disease and avoiding soy. Those are two that I think are commonly done, and sometimes doctors perpetuate some of these things, which is weird. I have listened to many an expert on like thyroid health and all kinds of things where people are worried about soy's influence. But the thing that keeps coming back to me is that these phytoestrogens are in all kinds of plants. They're not just in soy. So for people to specifically avoid soy for fear of estrogenic effects, they would have to avoid a whole lot of other plants to do the same thing, such as like apples and flax seeds and coffee and things like that have a pretty high concentration of phytoestrogens as well. So that stuff doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but it still shows up in the medical field. I mean, I still hear about doctors saying, "Hey,
Ignorance.
yeah." I mean, is that what your opinion is too?
Doctors typically are not good doctors do not make good nutritionists, in my opinion.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
and every that's the other thing is every plant-based dietitian I've ever talked to has not said, "Hey, you need to avoid soy." There's certain situations like they really are pretty pro soy in
Mm.
general. And it seems like there's just been a lot of fear mongering by the industry or whatever it is about
Yeah.
soy, probably because it's the next best thing to meat in terms of protein source. I'd say it's actually better for, the reason that it's a packaged deal and it's like you can't have meat without cholesterol and saturated fat. But at any rate, soy is such a good source of protein that I think it's kind of a threat. And maybe that's why it's been so railed against by a lot of different places. But at any rate, that and gluten seem to be kind of demonized by a lot of different communities. Any idea why you
Gluten
think,
more so.
yeah, you think gluten
And
more so? Why do you think that is?
I think it was marketing.
Oh,
I
okay.
th- how some you know how the over the past 20, 30 years we've had the low carb movement, we've had the sugar free and with and high fiber and this and that. We've had the I'm trying to think of other trends when it comes to how to market food to get people to buy more things that are supposedly heart healthy or diet friendly, whatever. And gluten-free foods over the years were something that you could have people buying and spend more money on. And I think that's what it was really, it was just to sell more food to people that was packaged up or whatever. And then
Yeah.
people just took it and ran with it as people often do with ideas
Yeah.
without trying to think about it.
And I have it's interesting because I mean there's a legit source for this, which is celiacs or being gluten intolerant and like having actual like life-threatening consequences to having and then sometimes just, very uncomfortable consequences to having gluten. So there's legitimate reasons for avoiding gluten. But I think it like especially me coming from being in California a lot. I had a lot of friends in a lot of circles that avoid gluten without a diagnosis. And it's hard to say for sure, but a lot of times I think that they're just kind of like, oh, I felt better a couple times than when I avoid gluten when I didn't have it or versus when I did have it. And then they just kind of have formed this association in their brain with gluten is bloating or gluten is, deleterious somehow. And maybe that's true. I don't know, but I think it could be at least some degree psychological. And, it's kind of a bummer because I think people that's another source of protein that a lot of people miss out on. If like imagine no soy, that means no tofu, no tempeh, no TVP, no soy curls. And then also if you're doing no gluten, that means no seitan. So you really don't have many sources of protein at that point that are going to be commercially available that aren't going to make you feel like you have to eat 1,000, buckets of it to get enough protein. So that like if you avoid both of those things, especially, it's going to become all of a sudden very difficult to get enough protein without feeling like you have to just shovel beans all day long, you know?
And then you're going to have a hard time digesting the foods that you're not used to digesting, whatever they are, and you're going to see, I was right,
Yeah.
confirmation bias.
Yeah.
Or you're going to be trying to figure out how to be able to have a healthy gut and a healthy digestive system. And you're dealing with problems with your digestive system, or worse, you're dealing with bigger health problems that are causing you distress with what you eat. Like,
Yeah.
but you're blaming specific kinds of foods as
Yeah.
opposed to whatever it is that you're dealing with, and you think that gluten is the answer. And now you have a negative association and a bad
Yeah.
feeling about whatever gluten.
Yeah, you have to be very careful not to have the list of things you avoid become too long for health and fitness reasons. I think ethical reasons, especially when they do studies on that, they figure out, okay, people who go back on veganism are the people that are doing it for health reasons. They think, oh, this is the only way to be healthy, and then they discover, oh, like I don't want to do this. But for ethical reasons, like it makes total sense. It's like that's not food to you. Anyways, yeah, I completely agree. I think it's one of those things where people can start to form associations in their brain before they actually have any evidence for it. They've just kind of said, I feel better subjectively, so I'm just going to go with this. And then before they know it, you kind of orthorexic because you have so many things that are on the no list for you just because one time you had a scary thought or feeling after eating it, So I definitely don't think people should be too reactive with that. But on a related note, one of the other, I'm trying to do things that are like related to other things. So
They're
like
all interwoven. It's
yeah,
cool.
they're
Go
pretty
for
close.
it.
But we only have three left, and the one that's closest to those is not getting acclimated to the increase in fiber that you're likely going to have when you go vegan. That
Okay, that can be uncomfortable, and that can be a shock when you're getting in the average. The conversations that when you start to consume fitness, whatever, and you're a fly on the wall for other people's conversations, and they talk about how their clients have these issues that they can't get them to get in more than 25 grams of protein, or they're like making sure they get in 30, 35 grams to make it different. I'm like, how do you live? It's crazy to me. And
Yeah.
then you understand when someone changes the way that they're eating and they go vegan, when their fiber on average more than doubles and they're not used to it, then you can understand.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that actually happened to me. That was one of the things that happened to me was I was not aware of how much fiber I was having before. And then when I went vegan, like I said, I was trying to get it all from like lentils and pastas and stuff. Meant that I was eating a lot more whole foods and a lot more fiber. But also, I was under the impression, because this is how dumb I was when I went vegan, I was under the impression that plant-based proteins were so inferior that I needed to eat extra. I needed to eat like 200 grams of protein and like 4,000 plus calories. I was literally eating like for the first week of being vegan, I was trying to go for like 4,400 calories or something like that. It was
Sounds
so
like
stupid.
fun, Sawyer.
No, it was,
Sign me
dude,
up.
I was I was running to the bathroom like 5 or 6 times a day at that point because I didn't realize, oh snap, I'm going from eating like maybe 20 grams of fiber a day, give or take, as a standard American, dieter, to someone who's probably eating well over 100, like
Hmm.
very quickly.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, my stomach noticed, my digestive system noticed. And so I have that tip for people when they first go vegan is especially if you're tracking, like you're already maybe tracking things, if you're doing things how we're saying, check how much fiber you regularly eat versus how much you're trying to introduce now. Because if it's like at the gym, if you have never squatted before, you load up 405 and then you unrack that, it's going to crush you like a Coke can. So you need to acclimate your body to the fiber that you're taking in. It doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. Just because it's stressful, just because it hurts if you do too much of it, does not mean that fiber is a bad thing. And you definitely need to have it. It's one of the most beneficial compounds you can take in. So just get my advice to people is just get acclimated to the fiber that you're trying to increase progressively, like in the gym.
Love it. Yeah. I'm gonna add to that. I like that a lot.
Always, I'm just trying to impress you all the time, Giacomo. That's pretty much my whole job. Like, okay, two more things. Not
What else?
trying new foods.
Not
Would
trying
you
new
agree with that
foods.
one? Do
Not
you
trying
think
new
people stay too
foods.
rigid when they go vegan or no?
What do you mean? This is an interesting one. I'm gonna give you a little pushback on this. What do you
Yeah.
think when you
Well, what I was thinking when I wrote that down
hmm,
was I think people are a little bit averse to like say, I mean, this is certain people, right? Certain people are pickier eaters than others, but they'll say
hmm,
they're a little more averse to like, I don't know, say tempeh or something. They're like, well, what is that? What's the white stuff on the outside of the beans? Like, there's stuff like it's just a little bit weird to them, I think,
picky
but they need to.
eaters?
Yeah, but it's understandable in some cases. This is just new stuff, but you
Hmm.
just need to go in with a mindset of like, hey, I need to be open to stuff. I need to try new things because if I just stick to, what I know is vegan and what I know I already like is vegan, you're probably going to be eating French fries, Oreos, chips, and salads maybe. You know what I mean? Like that's not a whole lot of stuff. Because I mean, depending on the family and the place you're coming from diet wise, you might not even know or like enjoy things that are vegan yet. So you need to be more open to like, hey, my diet, like the things that I'm gonna try, different cultures, foods, different like textures, different flavors. I should be open to this right now because the more things that I can find that I'm like, this is really good and it fits my goals, my
Hmm.
needs, that I'm gonna have that for, the rest of my life. I'm gonna know, hey, that's a good source, that's a good source. You know what I mean? And the more options people have for that, the more sustainable this stuff becomes, the more enjoyable it becomes. I just think it's such an important point. So even if people are okay at it, I think it's still worth mentioning. Hey, just keep trying new foods.
I
That's
think I see where you're going with this because maybe the blanket advice when someone makes a change, the safest way to look at it is to veganize what's on your plate, take how you're
oh
already eating and change
yeah,
it. But then if you get stuck and you're not truly enjoying the variety of foods that you have access to,
yeah,
when you go out to eat, when you're sharing food with family, when you move to something different, you can feel locked in and maybe have some regrets. Be like, I used to eat this way, now I eat this way. I'm not truly comfortable like this, and I kind of feel trapped, and I don't have options.
yeah,
Where if you really start to look around, you have access to all kinds of different foods and different things that you shop for, food that you can make. That's my favorite thing to do is to get people to take ownership to what's on their plate by saying, "Hey, why don't you make up some recipes? We can keep this simple.
yeah,
We can veganize what's on your plate and make it just the way that it was before." Well, why
Yeah.
don't you try making some interesting stuff? Because then you start to understand what these different foods are that you're a little apprehensive to try. When you actually make them on your own, you wind up
Yeah.
feeling proud, you wind up learning, you wind up enjoying. Even if you're someone who doesn't like to cook, even if you're someone who's
Yeah.
not going to do it regularly, even if you're not in the mood to do it, it is something that is going to get you to a place where you're going to be a lot more open-minded with trying different kinds of food. So my favorite thing to do is to get people to cook because when you can control what you eat like that by preparing it, you start to be a lot more open. You start to be less fearful of foods for all kinds of reasons. Whether it's like, what if I don't like the way this tastes? What if this food ingredient list is written in a way that I can't understand? What if there's something I think is actually bad for me on this food list? What if it was in a package and I don't want to bother and I don't want to buy something in a package? I mean, whatever it is. What if I don't like this kind of cuisine? I'm not in the mood to go to a restaurant like that. Like, make stuff, enjoy it. And then circling back to the whole process thing, like you're not going to sit there and criticize yourself for putting something into a food processor and saying, this was too processed. But you
Yeah.
might do that if it was in a package and it was handed
Yeah.
to or was prepared to at a store. But if you make it on your own and you can make the connection and it's no longer
Yeah.
a reach where I put something in a food processor, it's not out of the ground and I loved it because I made it. Now
Yeah.
you have a good feeling about and you're not scared of whatever food you find that wasn't like plucked off of a tree.
Yeah.
And you can go
Yeah.
enjoy other foods like that.
I love that, man. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's like a two for one. It's like try new foods and also make new foods because that gives you ownership of the whole process and you have options all over the place. I think one of the things that people fear when they first go vegan is I'm gonna miss things. I'm gonna miss out on stuff. It's gonna be too different. But I think once it's like traveling to a new country and realizing, oh, they have this thing that I like back home, but it's a little different. Just a little different, but it still scratches the same itch. That might be the case. There's a lot of one-to-one things now, honestly, in the vegan world. Like, I don't miss burgers at all because to me, the Impossible Burger is a burger. Like that is feel like there's any difference really to me, except for the ethical implications. Other side of that though is there's gonna be things that like, I don't know, certain, family dish or sushi or something that you really liked that might not ever be exactly the same, but you've got a vegan version now that tastes, it, scratches the same itch. You know what I mean? And I think everybody needs to have that, especially for things that are more emotional, like I love this thing. You need to have an alternative, either whether you make it or you found something that is, packaged and you like it or restaurant or whatever. You need to have something for everything. And it might not be exactly one-to-one replacement. And so you need to be open to new stuff because if you make it, whether you make it or you go out and you experience it at a restaurant or whatever, you're going to find stuff that you're like, wow, this is just as good, if not better. And I'm healthier when I'm doing it. And I feel better about it because ethically, you just need to go out and try it though. That's the whole thing. Like go out and try new things. That's this tip, right? It's just be open-minded, try new things. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think we
Yeah.
pretty much covered everything for this episode, unless you have any
He
other ideas in
nailed it.
mind. Closing thoughts, parting thoughts?
I guess well the last one actually we didn't do is
Oh no.
being too hard on yourself for mistakes. That
Mm,
that can just be summed up as like just don't don't treat it like a life or death thing for you. It is
mm.
a journey, it's a process. I didn't go vegan overnight. It was like a several month thing. I think most people that's the typical thing. So just yeah, be patient with yourself and like be persistent, but be patient with yourself and then learn where you need to learn. Get education where you need to get education because you can't just like will yourself to get better at something. You have to go out and seek new information and guidance from other people and things like
I
that.
feel
So
like that could be hard if someone had their act mostly together before they went vegan
yeah.
nutritionally and they had the right body composition and they had a relatively healthy relationship with food. Then they go vegan and they have to give it time and not be hard on themselves if they're not coming to the conclusion, even if they're going to get healthier long term. So, what would you do with somebody like that?
Well, that actually describes my situation pretty good.
Oh,
Like I was already pretty healthy. I was pretty fit when I went vegan.
your reasons are ethical, though. Let's say if that person's reasons they were health based, what would you do then?
Okay, health based. Well, I guess you'd have to look more into the future and say, what are the things hereditarily that I am at risk for, and what am I trying to prevent? So that you could say, well, okay, I don't need to do it right this second to prevent these long-term things, but if I'm doing it for health reasons, it's probably because of the long-term benefits of a plant-based diet. So I need to look into the future and say, well, this is going to lower my saturated fat intake on a daily basis. So I know I'm going to have protection against heart disease that way, stuff like that. So I think getting more educated about the nutrition benefits of it long term and again, how it's a dietary pattern overall that matters, not the like, oh, I had this one thing one time, I'm a bad person kind of thing. That's where I think it would come together. So focusing on the overall dietary pattern, and then again, finding those replacements for things. Maybe you like a regular burger right now, but then you eventually start liking a Impossible Burger. That's an upgrade. But then you could even take it further and say, okay, well, I'm going to make my own burgers. It's going to be super low saturated fat, but I'm going to find a way to make it really tasty, unprocessed. Like you could go as far as you want in that direction, but you need to start somewhere, and that means you're probably going to make some mistakes along the way. So
Fair. I like that. I like that a
yeah.
lot. Good answer.
Thanks, man. Well, we're pretty similar, so I feel like we're just whenever we give each other compliments, it's just kind of patting ourselves on the back too. It's kind of funny.
Anything else you want to talk about?
No, man, I think that was a pretty conclusive or a pretty good list, and hopefully we did all those subjects justice. I know it was a little bit rapid fire, but I think covered the main points, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping that by listening to this episode, you're armed to help others make fewer mistakes. You can laugh at the mistakes that you made, or commiserate with us and through a little bit of the misery that we went through together. Or if you're curious, you feel more confident in your ability to make this switch, and that you know that you have so much more support than you might even realize, and you definitely have that in us over here at Vegan Proteins. We'd be dying to answer your questions. We're all here to help. And that if you're already in it and you're a little unsteady, that perhaps you have some aha light bulb moments after listening to this episode. So those are my hopes if you're still here with us, which I hope that you are. And I want to thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Vegan Proteins, Muscles by Brussels Radio. Please do keep in touch with us. I highly recommend checking us out at Vegan Proteins, at Muscles by Brussels, on all the socials, and hitting the contact button if you're interested in one-on-one coaching, which I hope that you are. We'd love to have you here. Just go to veganproteins.com and hit the contact button, submit an application. And once again, my name is 𝐿𝐵𝐿𝐵𝐿.
I'm Sawyer.
And we'll talk to you soon. Cool. Let me hit the stop button here and